Good leaders lead, but great leaders grow. So, what are some of the best books that you can read as a leader in order to grow your leadership and expand your capacity? Well, let's talk about the 5.5 business books every church leader should read coming up. Hey, what's up, y'all? If you're brand new to the channel and we haven't met yet, my name is Chris Abbott, but all my friends just call me Abbo. I'm the co-owner of Church Marketing University, and I created this channel in order to bring you the best ideas, strategies, and tactics in order to attract new Sunday morning visitors, grow your church, and ultimately make heaven crowded. So let's dive into the 5.5 best business books that every single church leader should read. Now, honestly, for me, the hardest part of this entire thing was not making this like the top 25 books of all time, right? Because I love reading. I'm a nerd. I read all the time, right? Leaders are readers. Man, I have so many books that I'm passionate about that I'm really excited about. But for the sake of this video, I narrowed it down to the 5.5 best business books that you should read, right? Man, let's dive into the very first one. Okay, so first up is one of my very favorite books. I've recommended this probably hundreds of times to friends and family and pastors and church leaders, right? This is Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. I love this book because it's about why some ideas survive and others don't, right? So what they did is they actually identified a 6-part framework in order to make ideas sticky so that you actually remember them and they stick in people's mind, right? Which is something we all, especially as pastors and church leaders, we all need to know how to make our ideas sticky, how to make our sermons and our sermon series sticky, how to be able to communicate vision in a way that actually sticks and people remember it. And so that's why I think this is such a phenomenal book. I think every single leader should read it, right? That 6-part framework is really, really cool. They basically talk about the 6 things that your ideas need to be sticky. And the more of these ideas that you can use on one idea, the stickier it becomes. It actually spells out the word success, although without the last S, if that makes sense, right? So the S stands for simple. All of your ideas have to be simple in order to be sticky. The U stands for unexpected, which is a really, really cool chapter. The first C stands for concrete. The next one stands for credible. And then the E stands for emotional. And finally, the last S stands for stories. One of my favorite things is kind of the stories chapter in here. It just has some incredible ways on how to use stories to make things sticky. There's actually 3 types of stories that I wanted to highlight. The first one is a challenge, right? So think underdog, defeating the big guy, right? The David and Goliath story. I love this. I think we all love a great David and Goliath underdog story, right? So the challenge, that's a great framework. The second one is reaching out, right? So this is when an unfamiliar character comes in and helps someone in need, right? So think in the Bible, like the Good Samaritan, right? Coming along, a stranger helping someone in need. Those are always really, really cool stories, and they make ideas really, really sticky. And then finally, the last one is creativity, right? So think whenever a problem is solved in a really, really creative way. So a great example from the Bible of this would be Moses and the parting of the Red Sea, right? So you got Moses on the shores of the Red Sea, right? You got the Egyptians closing in on him, but the Bible talks about how they could actually hear the Egyptians yelling at him and tell them they were going to kill him, right? So now all the Israelites start freaking out and say, man, we should have just stayed in Egypt. At least we would have been living there in a slave instead of dying out here, right? And then God parts the Red Sea, uses a creative process in order to come to the rescue, right? That's why we remember these ideas. It's why they're so sticky, is because it uses that creativity framework. So one of my very favorite scriptures is actually in Exodus 14. I love this, right? So you're on the banks of the river. The Israelites are freaking out. They can hear the Egyptians, right? They're coming. They know they're about to die. They can't believe they're yelling at Moses. And what's Moses' response? In Exodus 14, 13, and 14, this is out of the Message, which I love. It says this: "Don't be afraid. Stand firm and watch God do his work of salvation for you today. Take a good look at the Egyptians today, for you're never going to see them again. God will fight the battle for you, and you keep your mouth shut." I love that. That's out of the Message. The New Living's great too. The New King James is amazing. But let's get back to the list. But man, sure do love that scripture. All right, number 2, Contagious by Jonah Berger. Now, this is all about why things catch on. If you've ever read The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, this is almost like the sequel to The Tipping Point. The Tipping Point was another one I almost wanted to put on here, but man, Contagious is so good. There are a bunch of great ideas. He also has a framework in there he talks about, right? But this is kind of like the science of why things go viral. So if you're trying to be better at social media and ideas and sermon series, right? And you're trying to get things where people are talking about it and you're trying to really work work on some of your word of mouth marketing or your word of mouth invitation strategy, then this book can really, really help you, because it's literally just all about why things go viral and why some things go viral and others don't. And he gives you a framework kind of like and Made to Stick, which is really, really dope. And I think it can be really, really helpful for you. So one of my favorite stories in the entire book is actually from a brand new steakhouse that's opening in Philadelphia. They know they're opening up their steakhouse, right? Like, how are you going to stand out among all the other restaurants in this giant city? What the owner decided to do is he decided to create a $100 cheesesteak. Okay, so think about it. This is in Philly, right? The land of Philly cheesesteaks. This is where they were born. And most Philly cheesesteaks are like $4 to $6, right? So he goes out and he creates a $100 cheesesteak, right? Why? Because that's a talking piece. That's something that you remember. It's something people talk about, right? Well, what goes on a $100 cheesesteak? Okay, check this out. Here's what actually is on the entire sandwich. This cheesesteak is made of Kobe beef, melted Telaggio cheese, shaved truffles, sauteed foie gras, whatever that is, right? Caramelized onions, and heirloom shaved tomatoes, all on a homemade brioche roll, brushed with truffle butter and glazed with premium homemade mustard. Man, I don't know about y'all. What are we doing here? Like, we need to go get a $100 cheesesteak and go split that, right? But again, that's why the owner did that. It's something, it's memorable. It's something that catches on and people start talking about it. In fact, I liked it so much. It's like one of the stories that stood out the most for me when I read the book. And now I'm telling you guys about it, right? So great book, Contagious by Jonah Berger. I love it. I think you're going to like it too. All right. Number 3, Good to Great by Jim Collins. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys have probably already read this book. I absolutely love it. There's so many principles from this book, right? It came out several years ago, I think about 12 or 15 years ago. So it's actually been around for a little while. If you've just heard some of the principles or you heard people talk about it, you're like, well, I haven't read it, but I understand the idea behind it. No, you don't, okay? I promise there's so much more in that book than you think you know. I'm sure you've heard some great principles in there, and it's phenomenal, but I promise you it is worth your time to read, right? The basis behind this book is that Jim and his research team basically took a look at over 1,400 companies, and what they wanted to do is they wanted to look at these companies, and they wanted to find companies that had, for at least 15 years, they had been average, right? So they're going at like exactly what the market does, and then there's some type of pivotal point where all of a sudden it jackknifes and kind of goes up, and they all of a sudden now they are they're exceptional companies and they're performing above the market. 15 years of completely average, they had to be good, something had to happen, and then they had to be above average, they had to be great for at least 15 years afterwards, right? So over 1,400 companies, they look at 40 years of data, right? And they identified 11 companies, and then when they went in, they did this massive deep dive, tens of thousands of man hours, right, of him and his team actually going through this, and they identified several principles that every single one of those 11 companies had and that they did in order to go from good to great. I think this is probably one of the best books for pastors and church leaders, because a lot of us have really, really good churches, right? But we're trying to get them to be great. And that's kind of hard. Trust me, I know, right? Like, it's hard for us to admit that about our own ministries and our own churches. But this is something that's really, really important for us to kind of confront reality and take a look at. And there are some really, really practical principles in this book that are going to help you do that. A couple of my favorites are the hedgehog concept, right? Where he talks about being really, really good at one thing, kind of finding your sweet spot. That's a phenomenal chapter. I also love the first who, then what, right? So if you ever heard people say, man, we just need to get the right people on the bus and get the wrong people off the bus, that comes from this book. And it's amazing. I use it in my business right now. So that's super helpful. The window in the mirror, right? Level 5 leadership. Man, there's so many good things in here. Okay, so do yourself a favor, go pick up a copy of Good to Great. All right, next up is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. Now, I'm going to admit right away, I'm a massive Jocko Willink fan, and I actually had the honor of having him to come to my church here just a couple of months ago. He did one of our men's meetings, which was awesome. To my knowledge, it's the first time he's ever spoke at a church. It was really, really incredible. I mean, we had, I think, over 2,000 guys who showed up to that just to hear Jocko Willink speak, right? I mean, because he's amazing, right? Jocko and Leif Babin are both former retired Navy SEALs, and so they basically took everything that they learned while they were Navy SEALs, that they learned in combat situations, and then then they took those and started a business consulting firm after they got out. And then they helped all these like Fortune 500 companies and big, massive companies all the way down to small, like mom and pop companies. And then they took all those leadership principles and they put them into a book. And I'm telling you, it is awesome, right? I mean, there's really cool Navy SEAL stories for every single chapter that illustrate each principle. I mean, you're going to love it. If you like any of that kind of stuff at all, or any type of leadership books, I mean, this kind of like set a brand new precedent in the leadership genre when this book came out. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's phenomenal. He talks about like the 4 combat laws, which are really, really incredible. And then just all these different principles that you can use in your church and your organization. Man, I'm telling you, it can help you in a huge way. So I really think you're going to like Extreme Ownership. Okay, so before I get to my last couple of books, man, I want to invite you to like this video and subscribe to the channel, right? So we're putting out brand new content all the time. We've actually got a bunch of new videos that we're about to drop on the channel. So make sure to subscribe and hit that little bell notification. And that way YouTube lets you know every single time we drop a new video. All right, number 5, start with why. Okay, this is by Simon Sinek. I actually talk about so many of the principles in this book in my videos. If you've watched any of the videos that we've done here over the past year and a half, you've probably heard me quote pieces of this book and quote things from Simon Sinek. This is actually the basis for his viral TED Talk that he had several years ago, right? So he did a TED Talk on how to, kind of start with why. I forget what the name of it is. It's not start with why, but it's something like that. Literally, if you just type in Simon Sinek TED Talk to YouTube, you'll see it. It's got like 13, 14, 15 million views or something. It's phenomenal. I've probably watched it 20 times. I'm not kidding. It's absolutely incredible. And this book is the basis for that talk. I read this book. I absolutely love it. It's got some incredible principles in it. One of my favorites is, Simon Sinek says that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Right? So, I love that because it's not about like selling what you do, like you're a church leader or you want to, help people and you want to spread the gospel of Christ, right? They need to know why you do it. So if you share your why, right, then what happens is people are compelled and they come to you. So, one of the things I do whenever I speak at conferences, right, or if I'm speaking to a group of pastors and church leaders for the very first time, is I like to share my why. And I usually share a story that I don't have time to get into for the sake of length on this video. But I talk about the number 7,755, right? That number keeps me up at night. It's because 7,755 people die in the U.S. every single day, and most of them don't have a relationship with Jesus, right? So legitimately, that number keeps me up at night. And I literally just think, man, what can we do? Like what YouTube videos can we create? What content we create? What Facebook ads can we create? What coaching programs can we create that's going to be able to help pastors and church leaders be able to make a dent in that number? Because wherever you are right now, like I know that I can't personally reach the people in your city, but you can, right? So if I create a video like this, right, and I share some ideas or strategies or tactics, right, or something that's working now on social media or technology, and then you take that and then you implement that at your church, now I'm helping you reach people in your city, right, in a city that I've never even been to. And I know there's people on the other side of your faithfulness. And so that's something that kind of gets me going, that gets me excited. I've actually shared the story with you guys, which maybe I will. Sometimes I'll make a video on that. Man, it gets me a little bit emotional, but that's kind of like my why on why I do, why I'm in ministry, why I do what I do. So phenomenal book. He tells a really cool story about Samuel Pierpont Langley versus the Wright brothers, right? So man, if you check that out, just remember that name, Samuel Pierpont Langley versus the Wright brothers. It's phenomenal. Again, I won't get into it in this video for the sake of time, but man, you're going to love it. So highly recommend Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And finally, 5.5. Now, the reason I decided to do 5.5 books in this video is because I actually haven't finished this last one. I'm about halfway through, so I can't fully recommend it yet because I haven't finished it, but it's phenomenal so far, at least the first half, right? And so that one is The Dichotomy of Leadership, also by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, right? So this is actually the sequel to Extreme Ownership. It's so good. I'm telling you, I love Extreme Ownership. I literally finished it and immediately went in and bought The Dichotomy of Leadership. I now have a signed copy from when he came to my church, which is pretty dope. And I'm super excited about this, right? So some of the principles he talks about in this, and I thought this was really interesting. He talks about the tension in leadership. And this is really interesting. Like you think about the tension of having to be a really good leader, but also a really good follower at the same time, right? Because everybody's leading, but everyone's also following. In the military, you might have a squad of men captain that you are leading, but you also have commander that you are following, right? So you have to take orders and you have to give orders. And so it's the tension between being a great leader of men, but also a great follower at the same time. That's a really interesting dynamic, especially in leadership. So he also talks about how to take extreme ownership over absolutely every single thing in the organization, and then also managing the tension between giving away ministry, giving away leadership, right, and empowering your team in order to do things without micromanaging them, right? So how do you take ownership over the entire organization, but also give pieces of it away and not micromanage your team so you can let them go run and actually go operate in their gifts? That's a tension to manage. And that's the whole idea behind the dichotomy of leadership. Another great one in there is how do you stay humble and then at the same time be willing to speak up against unwise or bad decisions that are going to either hurt the team or the mission. Again, just kind of these tensions to be managed in leadership. I think it's really, really interesting. I've never read a book that kind of talks about it quite in this way. Man, that's why this is number 5.5, the dichotomy of leadership. Okay, and then finally, I couldn't leave this one out. So I have an honorable mention, right? Honestly, this might even be the best book on the entire list. I couldn't leave it off. Honorable mention, it's Atomic Habits by James Clear. Okay, and my favorite quote from the entire book is that you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your system. If you're not happy with your life, your ministry, your church, your family, right? The problem isn't you, the problem is your systems. Man, I love this book. It's incredible. He starts getting into not only systems, but talks about something called habit stacking, which is really, really interesting. He also talks about identity and the importance of identity whenever you're trying to start or stop something. So if you were to go up to someone who's trying to quit smoking, right, and you were to offer them a cigarette and they were to say, oh, no thanks, I'm trying to quit, right? That person is going to fall back into smoking. And the reason is their identity, they still identify as a smoker, right? They identify as a smoker who is trying to quit smoking, right? So that person's always going to fall back into it because they still have that identity of a smoker. But if they go up to someone and just say, hey, would you like a cigarette? And that same person who's trying to quit says, oh, no thanks, I don't smoke. Right now, that person has a much, much higher chance of being able to quit smoking because they have now stopped identifying as a smoker and they now identify as a non-smoker. So it's the same thing with working out, right? It's, like, oh, hey, I'm on a diet or I'm trying to eat healthy. Those people probably aren't going to make it because they still have the identity as an unhealthy person who's trying to eat healthy, right? It's like, oh man, I'm trying to go to the gym. I'm trying to, make some new habits, right? But you still a person who stays at home and doesn't go to the gym and you're trying to become a gym person, as opposed to taking on that new identity and just saying like, oh yeah, like, hey, I'm going to the gym because I'm a gym person, right? Like, hey, I love eating healthy. I actually I'm a healthy person who eats healthy, right? Once you can find that identity, you can actually change. But for as long as you hold on to your old identity, you'll never actually be able to break that habit and move on. Right? Really, really interesting stuff. All right. So if you guys like this video, if you found this interesting and you want to learn more about these types of things and you actually want some help, some very practical ways of growing your church, practical leadership principles, templates, and kind of step-by-step courses in order to help you get in front of more people. Man, as I said before, I'm actually the co-owner of churchmarketinguniversity.com, and we have a couple of scholarships available. So we actually teamed up with a giving platform that has allowed us to be able to make a couple of scholarships available. So if that sounds interesting to you at all, head on over to churchmarketinguniversity.com/scholarship, and you can actually apply for a scholarship. We'll kind of take a look at it, and based on your situation, the size of your church, your budget, that kind of stuff, you can actually get up to a 90% scholarship off of Church Marketing University, and then you can just use a bunch of our templates in order to help you reach more people and get new visitors on Sunday. If that sounds interesting to you, head on over to churchmarketinguniversity.com/scholarship. No matter what it is, thank you guys for watching the channel. Super, super excited, and we'll see you in the next video.